You're listening to The Odd Couple with Lori Ross and Vikram Diol. All right, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode where we have a special co-host filling in. Vikram is still traveling the world somewhere in Europe. Hello, Vikram, wherever you are. I know you'll be listening. But this week, we are so grateful to have Bri Seeley joining us. Welcome, Bri. How are you?
Hello. Thank you for having me.
And for everybody out there, Bri Seeley is a very successful transformational success coach, and she is also the the Amazon best-selling author of Permission to Leap, the 6-phase journey to Break Your Vision to Life. I love all those taglines. And you and I met, and it was a beautiful meeting that we had. I knew I was going to be working with you at some point in the next phase of my journey. So I am so excited that you agreed to do this. Very last minute, by the way. So I'm grateful for your time. So thank you.
Thanks for thinking of me. I have enjoyed all of our conversations, and I'm sure today will continue along that trend.
Now, I've followed your journey, especially on Facebook. You have a huge social media presence, which to me is no doubt a part of your success, to connect with your audience, to be social. And when I was reading your book, The Permission to Leap, I noticed that you had this cool diagram. And for those who understand the start of The Odd Couple, it was really an odd couple because Vikram was very business in the business world and I was very much in the spiritual world. And I wanted to find the balance in between the two because I knew I could combine them together. I knew I could marry them together. And then you came on my path and you represented that middle pillar, that balance. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about your journey. And I know that you were in a different industry prior to doing your transformational coaching. Did you find that in the business world and the spiritual world were very different languages?
Absolutely. They're different languages, they're different energies, they're different outputs, they're different inputs I really do see them as like opposite ends on a spectrum. And now, of course, they don't have to be, right? Like you said, there's a nice blending area where you can have both, but traditionally they've been represented in our culture as one or the other and not both.
And how did you find your way to that middle pillar? Because I feel like that when you're in that middle pillar, you can have a bigger effect on the world.
Absolutely, because I see them too as like the inner and the outer as well, right? So the inner is the spiritual, the outer is the business. And so if you're just creating from a place of external stuff, it's only going to be a small piece of the puzzle. And if you're only creating from the internal, obviously you're missing half of the puzzle as well. So yes, I'm an quote unquote expert in this, and I'm still finding my way with it every single day as well. So, one thing that I always like to highlight is that it's a practice. And there are days when I'm more on the business end of the spectrum and days when I'm more on the end of the spiritual spectrum and days when I find myself completely in the middle as well. But it's not, it's not a rule now that like, oh, I've reached this level of whatever and now I'm square in the middle in the perfection of both all the time. It's
you kind of slide back and forth there.
Yeah, it's like an adjustment. It's an alignment every single day of like, where am I? What am I feeling? My coach just emailed me and she's like, how are you feeling? And I'm like, a bit bipolar. 1 second I'm on the business end, 1 second I'm on the spiritual end. And it's more of like a pendulum swing right now versus like a steady centering.
Well, that's funny that you mentioned kind of the pendulum swinging. So I don't know if you know, I've done a lot of research on different belief systems, and the Freemasons, I don't know if you've heard of the Freemasons, they have that.
Yes.
Okay. So they talk about the middle pillar all the time, and that's where you kind of have your most success. So you watch the trends when they're going to the extremes, but you jump off before it goes to the extremes. And it's just to kind of stay in that middle pillar. And you can slide over a little bit into the extreme and gain the experience, but they really talk about staying in that middle pillar for the ultimate success. You talk a lot about intuition in your book and how it's really important. So when did you kind of tap into that? Have you always been connected to your intuitive side? And I know that you had a great way of explaining it. You actually said was it a Greek word or a Latin word that meant knowledge from within? So when did you kind of come into that?
So, I mean, I think, and I'm in a process right now of really looking back a lot to do some really deep healing. And it's funny because I was just at my parents' for Father's Day yesterday, and I asked my mom if I could go through her old box of photos. And I pulled all these photos of me, like literally from when I was born up until like the age of 3 or 4. And I firmly believe that we are all born with intuition, all of us. It's something that is absolutely innate to us. It's what we are gifted when we come to this planet. And I feel like we allow the world to like take it from us, or we give it away to the world at some point. So I was looking back at these photos of me as like a 2, 3, 4-year-old, and I was like, man, I was so wise. Like that little girl was so wise. She was so tuned in. She like had a direct line, and she was in joy, and she was, like there's that old saying that, who were you before the world told you who you should be?
Oh,
and
that's powerful.
I feel like we all have it. And then we're fed all this information to show us that we can't trust it, and that we need to doubt ourselves, and that we need to focus here and there and all these outside places so that we don't trust our intuition. Because the reality is, if we all knew how incredibly and truly powerful we were, and how not only are we connected to the divine, but we are the divine incarnate. Like if every human on the planet operated from that place, we would live in a remarkably different world.
And that really goes back to that kind of that diagram you made, and it goes into that earth, the 5 senses. And if we can't see it, taste it, touch it, feel it in our hands, it doesn't exist. And
it's not real.
It's not real. And so there's this whole other world. And I actually almost encourage people to live in the extremes just for a little bit, because I know that a lot of people need it for balance. Because if you've lived in kind of that earth business extreme for a long time, you tend to go to the opposite extreme to the spiritual world for the balance, because it really is about the harmony. It really is about the yin and the yang. It really is about bringing it back to the middle, bringing it back to the center. But when you stay there too long, at least in my experience, and Bri, I'd love to hear your experience about it, I felt very isolated. And when I was in my spiritual woo-woo world, and I still have friends there and I still can go into that place, I'm not saying I'm afraid of that place, I was so sensitive. I couldn't go out in public as much. Like I just had to be meditating all the time and eating really, really high vibrational foods, which I highly recommend still. But I just felt like I was alone almost. People didn't understand.
Absolutely. And I think that there's a sense of isolation in either of the things, either of the extremes, because if you're so far into the business extreme, then you're feeling isolated from spirit. But if you're so far in the spiritual extreme, you're feeling isolated from the world, right?
Absolutely. And I've met those people in the spiritual world, and I almost call them spiritual arrogance, but man, they they are interesting because they can't really exist outside of these really high vibrating places. It's kind of interesting.
And my invitation is always like, yes, we are spirits, and we chose to come have a human existence. So we can't deny the other end of the spectrum. We can't. We came here to experience it. If your spirit didn't want to come here to experience it, you wouldn't be on the planet right now. You wouldn't be. So there is both, but we came here to experience both, not just one. We didn't come here just to be human, and we didn't come here just to be spirit. We came here to be a blending of the two. And so it really is in that middle place, that intersection between the two, that is like literally what we are here for in the world. That's what we all came for.
Hey, Bri, what inspired you to, and thank you for that, but what inspired you to want to be a transformational success coach? Is there a point when you, and if I should mention, you were in the fashion industry, right? In the fashion kind of world prior to doing all this. And I'm just curious kind of what that switch was for you where you wanted to start helping people, or women specifically.
Yeah. So what's interesting is that even with my fashion business, I was still helping women. Like, so that part of it. So for me, when I made the transition, my why didn't change. My what and my how changed. but my why didn't change. And so for me, the transition was actually quite easy, and it was all divinely guided, all of it. Again, the combination of spirit and earth, right? So I had this spiritual guidance come to me, and then it was my job on the ground, on the earthly realm, to go out and make the changes that I was guided to make. And so the inspiration hit me in meditation, and then I started reflecting and really opening up space and realizing that the universe had been guiding me towards this for over a year, and I just hadn't been listening.
Isn't that interesting? Did you get the
right?
universal 2x4 to the face?
Oh yeah, multiple times. In fact, a year before the knowledge, a year before the guidance came in really strong, I got the 2x4 that knocked me out of my job. So in 2014, I had been doing this job for about 8 years, and they emailed me out of the blue that was like, hey, just want to remind you, we cut your pay in half as of 5 days ago. And I was like, wait,
what?
in order to remind someone, don't you have to tell them first? How does that
oh
5 days ago, really? So that was a 2x4 that was like, no more of this job. You knew you didn't want it the day you took it. You've been in it 8 years. It's time to go. Say goodbye. And so that the universe gifted me that, right? Of course, at the time it didn't seem like
I've been there.
Yep. And then between that time period and when I got the hit in meditation that it was time to shut down my fashion brand, I was invited to start writing for the Huffington Post by Ariana Huffington. I had women reaching out to me asking me to help them bring their dreams to life. I wrote an article that went viral and landed me on the Today Show. I had a successful Kickstarter telling women's stories. All these things had happened and kind of come into fruition and all these things. And I was still blind to it, thinking, well, I'm just a fashion designer. It's fine. None of this matters anyways. And
wow. Okay.
I had to be guided to shut my brand down in order to open up to what was next. So I never really sought out to be a coach. I was asked to be a coach, and I said yes to it.
You said yes. And really your book is about, and I know that it's a direct quote, I think, that I heard you say on one of the local TV shows out here in Seattle, but it's really to turn nothing into something. And what I like to say kind of in the energetic world, because I see everything as energy, is turning it from wave form to particle form, making it concrete.
Yes.
What you really do. Well, actually, you posted something on Facebook, and I actually took a screenshot of it because I wanted to kind of bring it up. And it really hit me. It says, I'm just going to read the first part here. I receive a lot of messages from people that say, you inspire me. And while I appreciate the reflection, it pisses me off. So can you talk a little bit about that?
So again, in looking at the spectrum of spirit to human, inspiration's great, right? You can go anywhere and be inspired. And it's a really important piece of the puzzle, but it's not everything. And what I see a lot of is people getting really inspired and then never doing anything with it. So for me, inspiration is about literally embodying spirit, being in spirit, and then doing something about it. So taking that inspiration and going out into the world and creating from it. So like I said, the shutting down my fashion brand, that was me being in spirit. I was inspired, but then I had to go actually do it. All of the book came to me in meditation. That was me being in spirit, but I still had to go write the book. So, I love it when people are like, oh, you're so inspirational. And what are you going to go do about it?
What are you going to do about it? And that's
and that's the spirit human thing, right? We can't just be inspired. You won't ever create anything in your life. And we are all here to create something for the world. We all have something within us that the world needs. So it's cool. Go be inspired. Absolutely. And get off your butt and go do something with it.
Well, and it's funny because I met you, but I remember meeting you and I just started thinking about and getting together and putting together my business. And I had all these pieces, but I didn't know what to do with them. But I was making the steps. And so I was like, well, these are going to be something. So what do you do when you're guided and you're creating the steps? Do you just kind of keep going when you don't know how they fit together?
I mean, yes. And then the other thing I would say is you can always do something, right? So even you reaching out to me when I was back in Seattle to like sit down and have coffee, that was a step. Even, me getting a journal and starting to like brain dump my book stuff, that was a step. That wasn't me writing the book, wasn't me launching the book, but it was a step in the process of letting the book come through me. So even if it doesn't look like you launching the thing, right? Like even just go buy the URL. That's a step.
Yes.
That's a step.
Yes.
So, when I say don't just be inspired, go do something about it, it's not that you have to go eat the entire elephant in one sitting and like bring everything within you out into the world. It's a process. There are phases that you go through in the creation process, but do something.
Well,
like the universe cannot deliver to you if you're not in action, if you're not doing something about it. One of my clients said to me last week, the universe cannot move a parked car. It is your job. You have to start the car. The universe can't move something that's not started. So taking action, taking baby steps, doing something about it gets the wheels in motion to allow you to then be able to launch, allow you to then be able to take those bigger steps. But you have to do something in order to get there.
And in your book, you actually mentioned the leap is actually not a sprint, it's a marathon. Is that correct?
Yeah.
All these little steps.
Yeah. I always, in reference to the elephant metaphor that I just said, is like, how do you eat an elephant?
One bite at a time.
Exactly. So everyone looks at this huge elephant and they're like, oh my God, it's so big. You don't have to look at the elephant. Just take one bite today. That's it. Go buy the URL. That's one bite. Tomorrow, get a Squarespace membership. That's another bite. Maybe within the next month, put a website up. That's another bite, right? Like you just have to know. And I always say, I had another Facebook post where I was like, I don't know anything. Like I don't know until I'm guided to do it, right? So
Right.
like I don't have this huge, massive, I have a vision of what I want in 5 years, but I don't have a step-by-step plan of how I'm going to get there because that's not my job. My job is to be in spirit. And when I get that inspiration to then go do it.
And I actually talked to a business owner the other day, and he actually has two different businesses. He has his kind of music career, and then he has his training, physical training. And I was trying to counsel him that he was doing it all backwards. He's like, well, I need $10,000 to do this. And I said, well, that's not how it works. Because money is a symptom of the energy that you the intention that you put out. So, and it comes in little steps at a time. You use the metaphor of the elephant. I always use the mountain because I wrote the book, The Goddess of Mount Rainier. And I had to train on smaller mountains, right? One step at a time before I could even attempt the big one, the big
right.
giant mountain. And I don't know how you feel about that when people are holding themselves back by saying, I need all of these things before I'm ready. Because there's so many of us out there. And if you're listening to this, and this will be posted today, by the way, with my master editing, what are you saying to those people that are waiting for the steps to already be there? It's
never going to happen.
Right.
And you're going to be waiting your entire life.
It's never going to happen.
It's really as simple as that. The universe rarely ever does it reveal the entire path. I would guarantee you that when Elon Musk started, however many years he started ago, he maybe knew that he was going to be launching rockets in space, but he didn't have all of the plan figured out. Like no one knows. This is like the biggest myth. I think that everyone has like this big elaborate plan. No one has a plan. Like the most genius people show up at yes, they have a vision and they have somewhat of a skeleton. But like most people don't know exactly how it's going to happen because there are so many miracles and surprises that happen on the way that you could never plan for. I could have never guessed that one, I was going to get invited to write for the Huffington Post by Ariana Huffington. Two,
I need to read that article, by the way.
Yeah, I could have never guessed that an article that I was terrified to write was going to go so viral. It was republished in 4 different languages all around the world. I think it hit every single continent on the world. And I received a phone call from the Today Show asking me if I would do a segment on their show.
Can I
Like,
ask? Can I
that
ask what
is
the article
something.
was about? I've never even heard this about. I've never even heard this about you. I'm fascinated.
It was about being child free and what it's really like at
Oh
the age
yes,
of, I think at that time I was like 31, to be
yes.
child free in the world and all the things that come along with it and whatever. And, like I never could have expected, like this was something about me that my grandma didn't even know. So I was voluntarily sterilized when I was 29. I asked my medical provider for a course of 6 years to fix me. I I talk very bluntly about this.
No,
I'm
that's
like,
fine.
I talk about it in terms of like being sterilized and neutered and, all these things. Anyways, I never could have guessed that this experience that I had, that I just was simply sharing my voice, could have ended up that way. That's something I never could have planned. Like, oh yeah, on August, blah, 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 the Today Show is going to call it. That is something I never could have planned. So it's okay to have like a framework, to have a general idea, but you're plan as much as you want, right? It's never going to work out the way you think it is. So why
Never.
not just open up to being guided? Because the universe knows way more than you will ever know.
Well,
Ever.
two things I want to say. Especially, I think it's amazing that you did that, and that it is an option for women to not have children in this world. But really, you've given birth to so many things.
Right.
A child is just a physical representation of that. I don't know if we necessarily. I don't know if I believe we definitely have a life purpose, except to be human, and so to kind of figure out how to kind of play in this human world and this spirit world. And so when people say I have this destiny, I kind of feel like you create your own destiny. And I don't know if you agree or disagree on that. We might have kind of, like you said, a skeleton plan before we come in, but I don't know. I just feel like there's certain things that we are, if we had this destiny, are we really creating then? So
Right. And the other, aspect of this is that once you take the next step that you're taking, there's a million possible different outcomes to that step. So depending on what outcome comes is what's going to determine the next step. So you can't look at it and say, okay, I'm going to take this step and this is going to be the exact outcome. And because of that exact outcome, then I'm going to, I know that this is my next step. You can't know that from the perspective of where you're currently standing. You just can't. So you take the step, you allow the outcome to reveal itself to you, and then you're going to have to reassess anyways, because even if you say, I'm going to take this step and this is going to be the outcome, you're going to get a different outcome. And then you're going to have to reassess anyways. So why spend all the time and energy making this huge plan that is going to have to be reevaluated after you take the first step anyways? Like, why not just trust that you know what you're doing? The universe knows what it's doing. You have access to the guidance in any moment of any day, and you have the knowledge and capabilities to show up and do whatever you're being asked to do. Like, that's really all of the successful ingredients, and then everything else comes together.
Oh, I love you. I just want to keep you with me all the time. So I want to talk a little bit, because I'm not gonna talk about this. Kind of came up, and I'm gonna follow my intuition on this because I feel like somebody needs to hear this. Your book is about the 6-phase journey to bring your vision to life, and I want to go over really quick. The first is commitment, second alignment, third clarity, fourth the universal double check, 5 inspired action, and the last step that you list is called the feedback loop. Can you explain to me what that really is?
So it's really an assessment process. So here you are, you've taken this step, like we were just talking about, you've taken this step, and now you get to sit down and be like, okay, what worked? What didn't work? What felt really good in that process? And what didn't feel quite so good? And you get to start looking at those things on a more consistent, regular basis. So like I sit down last night, Sunday night, got to sit down and really look at, what did I create in the last week? What actions did I take? What worked? What didn't work? What felt good? What thoughts were aligned? What beliefs were aligned? What weren't? And it's just essentially a refining process of like, oh, okay, this thing didn't work. It didn't create the results I wanted. Was that because I wasn't aligned with it, or is it because it's not something that I'm supposed to be doing right now? Got it. Okay, so now knowing that, then where's my attention going to go next week? Because if you keep going on the same trajectory of doing all the same things all the time that aren't working, that don't feel good, and they're not creating the results you want, well, duh, you wouldn't do those again next week. But most people don't do the self-assessment to be aware enough to know what's working and what's not working, to be aware enough to know then where they should put their time, energy, and attention in the subsequent days, weeks, months, years.
The image I kind of got, you kind of get stuck in this circle of the same pattern. So it's kind of, it sounds to me like it's kind of like a pivot point. Would you say, like, if you decide to pivot in a different direction?
Well, and I think it's a constant assessment of like micro pivots. So even if it's not a pivot, say from like fashion to coaching, it's a pivot of like, okay, here I am in my coaching business. I'm using all of these marketing tactics. This one's not feeling quite so great. So, is it an alignment issue? Do I need to get back into alignment with it? Or is it simply just that it's not where I'm supposed to be putting my time, energy, and attention right now? And if that's the case, then where is my time, energy, and attention better served, right? So it's like little micro pivots. Well, every single day, week, month, year, whatever, to make sure that you're still in alignment with the path you're walking down, and that you're creating the things that you want to be creating in the world.
Yeah, and I have to say, I know you said your book came to you in a meditation. My business came to me in meditation. I got the logo and I got the name, and it was very clear it was 7 stones. And I thought it was a crystal shop. I was like, oh, 7 stones crystal shop. But really, it was really representative of the rainbow of the earth world all the way through the spirit world, right? And so just so you know, I have done a lot of the feedback loop, and it's now 7 Stones Media, 7 Stones Publishing, 7 Stones Virtual Reality, and 7 Stones Radio. So I had no idea that was this was 2 years ago. I saw the image in a meditation of 7 stones with the logo, and I had no idea what that meant. And I actually worked at a crystal shop, and I realized, and actually that is interesting too, because I thought it was one way, and the universe said, here's your experience, what you think it is. And I realized right away that is not what I wanted. So be careful what you wish for, what you think it is supposed to be, right?
Well, and that's exactly what we've been talking about, right? Like, you have this plan for it being this certain thing. And you could have sat down and planned out everything and started to get out, like, where am I, who's my supplier going to be? Where's my venue? Where all these things, like, you could have made this huge plan around that.
I did, actually. There was a big business plan. That was a waste of time. Maybe not. I don't know. Instead of being open.
So interesting. We always think that, we as humans have all the answers and that we know best. And it's like, you got to then, as a human, go experience what you thought it was. And the universe got to be like, that's not it.
I told you so.
Well, and just giving you the opportunity to get deeper into, okay, then what is it? How does it feel? How do I want to feel? And you just, like, that's that inner excavation process of clarity, basically.
But what do you feel about ego in business, and maybe because everyone has a different definition of what ego really is. I don't know if anybody really knows what it is. But when you're doing your feedback loop, is there a space? Does ego kind of have to take a back seat when you're getting feedback from yourself and from other people?
A little bit. I have actually been really triggered lately by people with big egos, which of course is an invitation for me to sit with myself and, like, where that's coming from and what, why I'm getting triggered by that. But I feel like it definitely has a place. Because if we didn't have that drive and that motivation, and let's be clear, the healthy drive and motivation, right? Not the destructive, narcissistic, whatever drive and motivation. So, I feel like the ego can be incredibly helpful to a point. Now, of course, if it's running the show and it's dictating and controlling and bolstering and not validating, what's the word? Justifying and, obviously that's something completely different, but I think that it should have a seat at the table, but maybe just not be the primary seat and not be like the loudest seat. Elizabeth Gilbert talks in Big Magic about how she lets fear have a seat at the table. And I think it's really important to let all aspects of ourselves have a seat at the table, because if we don't, one, it's going to be there anyways, whether or not you're acknowledging it's there. It's going to come along and it's going to want to say stuff. So just because you're denying it from having a voice doesn't mean it's not taking up space in your life. It's just about how are you using that to be a healthy aspect of your life and business, and not a destructive one.
Well, and I think with everything too, including ego or politics or whatever you want to look at, there's always the spectrum. And so there's the lower vibration and the higher vibration of everything. And so I refinding my ego, because I think a lot of us women especially are afraid of the ego. And I'm like, oh, here it is. This is nice. But I do want to wrap things up, but I wanted to mention that you are a transformational success coach. You have your own podcast called But How, a podcast to help you bring your ideas to life. And I highly recommend anybody that wants to contact Bri. She gets shit done. She will help you get shit done. She will, there's no excuses. She will make sure that you are getting, there's just no excuses. You just do it. You just do it. You take every step, and, things come up with every step. I know that they've come up with me, and you feel like it's a wall sometimes, but she will help you do that. So what are some ways that people can get a hold of you, Bri?
The best place is probably my website, which is my name, briseeley.com. I do happen to love Instagram, so if you're interested, you can come join me and play with me on Instagram. But if you're interested in working with me, the best place is probably through my website.
Okay. Well, I wanted to thank you for filling in very last minute. I mean, as of yesterday, she agreed to do this. So I'm so grateful. I know that we're going to help a lot of people, and you've already helped me just by being you. So I appreciate that. So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for thinking of me, and we'll tell Vikram that he owes me.
Yes. All right. Have a good one.